Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and today I wanted to do a video that was a little more off the cuff. You might have noticed that I've been uploading some domain content over the past month or so. It's a format that I've really fallen in love with, and I want to share as much of it as I possibly can. Now, you might have seen a deck profile that I did a while ago for Millennium from Hades 2, and that one was very produced, but I feel like that makes sense for bridging the gap between Yu-Gi-Oh! And a character that has nothing to do with the franchise. But today, we're going to be covering the deck of Weevil Underwood, Duel Monster's most underhanded duelist. So we're just going to do everything here on Master Duel because it's probably the slickest setup that we have for talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, if you're interested in how to learn domain format, I've got a video coming up soon that's going to go over how to play and also why you should play it. So you'll learn both how the mechanics are and also what makes the format unique. You can probably suss out some of it right here as we're talking about it, but don't worry, I'll have a better explanation for you in just a bit. For now, I want to go through the exact deck that I played during those proceedings, and then go over things like what I would change, and also my decisions for all these individual cards. The first one being the deck master. It's the most important decision you'll make when it comes to crafting your deck, and I chose what else? But Parasite. It's probably the most iconic Weevil monster that also works out as a deck master. Funnily enough, we do have the option of still giving this to our opponent even though it is our deck master, so if we can get them to draw the card, summon it to their field, and force them to have all insect monsters, that would just be really funny. Unfortunately, Link monsters exist, so it's pretty easy to get this removed from the board, but if they only have Link monsters that work with something like dinosaurs or spellcasters, they're going to have a bit of a problem when they're all insects. That being said, we did choose this deck master for a particular pod. Some of the decks that were going into this weren't exactly the most highest power level that exists out there. So, if you're interested in a more comprehensive deck master, I would recommend Beargrim, Shelled Emperor of the Thorned Crown, it is? Forest Crown, that's the one. Not only does it have the same domains of Earth and Insect, it also mentions Plant in here, so you have a whole other subsection of monsters that you can play in your main deck. And also, it's just like a dragon ruler for insects and plants, so it's very easy to deploy. It's got great effects. I would highly recommend this if you're looking to amp up the power of your Weevil deck, and you don't mind playing something that he never touched as his signature monster. Now, let's move on to the main deck. First up, we have our normal monsters, Petite Moth, Basic Insect, Big Insect, Killer Needle, Gokibor, and Insect Knight. Now that one's a bit of a 5Ds card, but it helped round out the normal monster roster. There's a bit of a sub-theme when it comes to some insect support that check to see if the monsters are normal, so we played a few of them because they kind of fit the bill. Next up, we have Larva Moth, and this is a pretty good way to segue into the fact that we are in fact playing the Cocoon of Evolution line. We've got Petite, we've got Larva, we've got Great Moth, we've got Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth, all wrapped up in Cocoon of Evolution. Now, are we ever actually going to resolve this? The answer is no. Unfortunately, when it comes to checking the turns that would allow you to summon any of the monsters with Cocoon of Evolution's effect, it checks your turns, not any other turns, so unfortunately that's not going to resolve, but we have to play it because it's Weevil. Next up is Parasite Paranoid. Now, this is one that on the surface might seem like a better deck master, but its effect to equip to a monster only activates from the hand, and we can't really do that from the deck master zone, so we're just going to have to be content with using all of its great effects from our main deck. Cockroach Knight is another Weevil card that we're just playing. It has some interesting interactions with if it's sent to the graveyard, it gets put back on the top of our deck, which can be detrimental a lot of the times, so make sure you have some kind of shuffle effect on hand to get that guy sunk back in there, otherwise you're going to be stuck drawing the same monster over and over again. Rose Papillon is in here. This is probably very easily cuttable because we don't have a lot of level 7 or higher insect monsters that we would want to be tribute summoning for, but, you know, we can if we want to, and then it can also attack directly if we have another insect on the board, so nice little upside on a 1400 point monster in a deck that can boost the attack power, so there's something here. We have our Inzektor package. Now, when it came to playing insect themes, I wanted to limit us from playing the more modern engines. Things like Ragnarika and Bee Trooper would probably be a bit too strong for the pod that we were playing in, but keep in mind that you could play them if you wanted to up your power level. For here, we went for one of the oldest insect archetypes, Inzektors, and while that might seem odd, considering they were the scourge of the format when they were playable, a lot of those plays depended on you having multiple copies of Centipede and Dragonfly, which you can't have in Domain. Right now, it really plays more into the insects with equip cards part of the deck. There are a few of those that care about that, so this helps facilitate that, and then you can just play Hornet and then equip Giga Mantis from a graveyard and have a 2400 attack monster. There are also some incidental synergies. Sometimes you'll be able to use Centipede plus Hornet, or rather Dragonfly into Hornet, into Centipede, into Hornet. You can end up doing a little bit of that big combo, but against 2 additional opponents, it's not super oppressive. So I felt like it was appropriate to play in this game. Gokipole is here to lean into the normal monster part of the deck. When it's sent to the graveyard, we can add a level 4 insect monster from deck to hand. Then if it's a normal monster, we can special summon it, then destroy a monster on the board whose attack is higher than the monster that we special summoned. And Big Insect only has 1200 attack, so we can handle a lot of stuff, including Gokibore and Killer Needle. Basically, all of these make for great targets for it. We could also do Insect Knight. If our opponent's monster is 2000 or higher, we might as well get a bigger monster. But in general, we're going to summon our smaller ones so we can pop monsters with Gokipole. Propagandic. This might seem a bit out of place considering it's a psychic, but rest assured, it is also a normal attribute monster, so it fits into our domains. The big idea here is that if we control a beast, insect, plant, or rock monster, is that the original type, that is, we can declare one of those types that we control, and then Propagandic becomes that type. Then it applies 2 effects. 1, all face-up monsters on the field become the same type as this card. No. And that plays into punishing our opponent for having insect monsters, kind of like how Parasite does. This just does it a lot faster. The second one is monsters on the field with this card's type cannot be targeted by either player using the effects of monsters your opponent controls with that same type. So what does that mean? Well, once this is applied and all of the monsters on the board are insects, none of our opponent's insect monsters can target insect monsters on the field with card effects. Our insect monsters can target theirs just fine, but theirs cannot affect each other. This does give effectively protection to our opponent from our opponent's effects, but they're not safe from us, and we're safe from all of those. So this was a very funny card to help lean into that part of the strategy. Infinite Antlion is an NR staple. It summons for free. We can equip cards. We can blow up cards. It really just does everything that we want in an insect deck while being just a little guy. He's not too oppressive. He's got good utility. Pinch Hopper, when this card you control is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon an insect monster from your hand. This was another Weevil card, we had to put it in here, and then it gets insects out of our hand that we otherwise would have trouble summoning, so we'll take it. Aztekipede and, as an extension, Doomdozer are also not DM era, but they're free insects that we can special summon. Sometimes they're big, like is the case with Doomdozer. The milling isn't super relevant here. Most of the times, they're free bodies for other summons. Cross Sword Beetle gives all of our monsters piercing while we have another insect monster, so that's pretty neat. Residence Insect has swiftly become a staple in insect decks. If it goes to the graveyard, we can search any level 5 or higher insect monster. That can be Doomdozer, and by banishing Residence Insect, it then turns into an Insect Foolish Burial to set up any of our other insects, including a card like Gokipole, which of course combos really well with the Doomdozer. Primitive Butterfly, it has a level modulation effect, but really it's here because it's potentially a free summon for insects to help get our cards off the ground. Bio Insect Armor is going to function really well with a fusion monster we'll talk about later, but it equips from the hand or graveyard to an insect, and then it gives that monster a 1500 attack and 2000 defense boost, but only during the battle and main phase 2 phases. Which I wouldn't say it's only relevant at those times. It would be nice if we could have those stats during main phase 1 for that fusion monster, but in battle, it still gets that huge bonus, and then during main phase 2, we can access it. More on that in just a bit. Next up is Insect Princess. This is part of the strategy where we punish our opponent for having insects. It forces all insects to attack position, and then if it runs one over, it gains 500 attack. So after just one battle, it turns into a 2400 beater, which is pretty powerful. Next up we have Insect Queen. Now this card is just terrible. It sucks. You have to tribute a monster to even attack with it. During the end phase, if it does destroy an opponent's monster by battle, you get to make an insect monster token, which kind of makes up for the monster that you tributed. So if the token sticks around, you can tribute it for the next attack and then recycle that over and over again. But it sucks. It's terrible. Even the fact that it gains 200 attack for each insect monster on the field isn't super relevant. It will check our opponent's insect, so if we set up the cards where our opponent's monsters are insects, that's a pretty big boost. I don't think it's worth it. Instead, focus on getting Metamorphosed Insect Queen. Now, this card is pretty powerful. It can't be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned by a card effect, which we'd want to do, because otherwise it's really tough to get onto the board. While another insect monster is on any field, not just yours, your opponent cannot target insect monsters with card effects, and they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So all of their removal does not work. Well, not all of their removal. All their destruction removal doesn't work. So it's a big protective field. At the end of the damage step, if this card attacks, you can tribute a monster, and this card gains an additional attack in a row against a monster. Note that it is not... You can't do this to attack directly with it. It has to be against a monster. Also note that it is not once per turn, so you can do this as many times as you have fodder to summon with this. Summon, use, tribute, words. Lastly, once per turn during the end phase, you can special summon an insect monster token. Kind of like the ones from Insect Queen. The best part, though, is that this checks during the end phase, not your end phase. So a turn cycle, including with your opponents, means that you're summoning upwards of 4 tokens, which you can then cash in for additional attacks on a 2,800 point monster. That provides protection. This card is one of my favorites for domain format. It's awesome. Humongous Hive Hegemon. The important part here is that you can summon this when an insect monster is special summoned, and during each end phase as a mandatory effect, each player can special summon an insect monster from their hand or graveyard, but negate its effects. Now, the funny thing is that insect is not exactly one of the best supported types in the game, so it's very unlikely that your opponent will be running any. So generally, you're the only person who is going to be benefiting from this. And this is, once again, during the end phase, meaning a full turn rotation could net you 4 monsters. This probably won't go over quite as well, though, as Metamorphosed Insect Queen, because it lacks the effects destruction protection and targeting protection, and also you're summoning real monsters with these that, even though they have their effects negated, feel more real when they're not 100 attack and defense tokens. So be careful with how you use Zek Stagger. Eradicating Aerosol. This leans into the idea that we are punishing our opponent for having insect monsters, and we will ensure that they have insect monsters. This is best when we don't have our own insect monsters in play, because even with Metamorphosed Insect Queen, it doesn't protect us from our effect destruction, which does kind of bite, but once again, it was a Weevil tactic. We have to play it. Graceful Charity. Reminder that there is no ban list in Domain. There's just the Singleton rule. So you can play all kinds of busted spell cards, so we'll go over them really quickly. We have Graceful Charity, even with the discard 2, even if your deck doesn't have any graveyard effects, it just lets you keep the best cards out of your top 8 or 9, depending on how things are going for you. This is just a fantastic card, and it gets even better with graveyard synergies. Pot of Greed is just a +1. Painful Choice is great in any deck that has cards that work well in the graveyard or has graveyard synergies. Just pick 5 cards that have good graveyard effects. Your opponent picks one of them that you don't get access to, but you have the other 4 raring to go. And bonus, if the card that you put in hand synergizes with any of your other cards in hand, or it has a way of getting it into the graveyard, it's like it didn't even matter. Multiplication of Ants turns 1 monster into 2 insect tokens, which we can use for link summoning. Insect Imitation tributes one of our monsters to special summon an insect from our deck with one level higher than it. We do have a cool progression of levels here, so using this to essentially rank up our insects is pretty neat. Terraforming is for our 2 field spells. You've probably noticed one of them by now, which is very funny. Jade Insect Whistle is here for when we give our opponent our Parasite, though this is one of those easily cuttable ones if we choose a different deck master. Hidden Armory is here because we do have a couple of equip spell cards that we want to search out. Unexpected Die is here because we do have those normal monsters, so why not give ourselves the opportunity for a free material. Speaking of free material, Bee-Trooper's Descent gives us a Bee-Trooper token, which is a level 3 monster with 100 attack and defense. It has the bonus of, if we have a insect with 300 or 3,000 or more attack, we also get to pop a back row, but we're not really relying on that one. Bee-Trooper Landing, as well as the Polymerization that we skipped over, basically fill the functions of summoning out our fusion monsters. This one has a bit more longevity because we can banish 2 insect monsters to put it back in our hand, so it works as discard fodder, or we can set it as a bluff, and if it gets popped, we can bring it back that way. We also skipped Monster Reborn, but there's not a lot to talk about it. We get either one of our own monsters back, or one of our opponents. It's very flexible and very powerful. Zentrite Co-O is here to help us access our Inzektor cards and help set things up almost immediately. The downside is that you need to send another Inzektor card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, so this can be a brick if we don't see any of the other ones. This one would probably get scrapped, especially if we step away from the Inzektor cards. Ninjutsu Art of Mosquito Marching is here. If we get a bunch of level 4 insects in our hand, or really any insects that share a level, we can summon them out. Once again, this is to turbo out our material for other summons. Trap Tantalizing Tune is here, generally as a Destiny draw. We get to pitch a level 4 insect to draw 2 cards, and then we can recycle a level 4 insect. This gets better when we get Beargrim in here, because this lets us use the plant section of that. We have Laser Cannon Armor and Insect Armor with Laser Cannon. These are just dumb equip spells, but we had to play them because they were Weevil focused, and technically they are equip cards, so they work with our equip sub-theme. Inzektor Sword Excalibur is the only one that has meaningful usage. It gives the Inzektor an 800 attack and defense boost, and if sent from field to grave while face up, you get an Inzektor monster from your graveyard, so it's some recycling. The Seal of Orichalcos. Yeah, so there was that time in the filler arc where Weevil used the Seal of Orichalcos to fight Yugi, and that's where you get the Monster Cardo meme. So we, of course, had to play this. It wouldn't be on theme otherwise. Giant Ballpark, though, is our better option if we are looking to actually win the game. If any player would take battle damage, keep that in mind, you can negate that damage, then send a level 4 or lower insect monster from your deck to the graveyard. If the sent monster was a normal monster, you can special summon all copies of that monster from your hand, deck, or a graveyard. This is absolutely fantastic because we can send any of our normal insects with this effect, and then summon them right back out onto the field, because while it doesn't do the intended effect in regular constructed where you send one normal monster and then summon out a triplicate of them, we still get a free monster out of it, and with a whole turn cycle, that is 4 instances where we could potentially negate battle damage to summon an insect, and I'm all for that. There's also the effect where if our opponent sends one of our monsters that we control to the graveyard by a card effect, or rather if a monster we control, oh yeah, it is from we control, so it has to be from the field, send it to the graveyard by a card effect, we can get an insect normal monster back from our graveyard. We're not playing any big ones like the big metal armored bug to take advantage of this one fully, but I feel like it's still good that we have access to something like Insect Knight, because it's a fairly large-sized body, to kind of retaliate against our opponent's removal. Insect Barrier, once again, if we make our opponent's monsters insects, this will stop them from attacking at all. Giant Ball Game is very funny. So it's effectively a Monster Reborn for level 6 or lower insect monsters the turn that it's played. And then you can reveal an insect monster from your hand and a face-up card, or rather, you reveal an insect from your hand, then target a face-up monster that your opponent controls, and an insect that you control whose attack is smaller than what you revealed. So you effectively want to have a big insect in hand. Even Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth works as just the biggest insect that you have. And then you take one of your insects, and then you swap control of those targeted monsters. So you get your opponents, they get yours, and your monster becomes an insect, and that swap is permanent. So we can give our opponent a card like Pinch Hopper or Goki Pole, run over it with the monster that we stole. It's still an insect. We get to trigger those monsters' grave effects. It's pretty slick. Though, take a note, I forgot about this. These effects are mutually exclusive. You cannot revive and then do the swap in the same turn. That was a big misplay on my part. Cocoon of Ultra Evolution. This is one of the best cards that we have access to in the deck. If any insect monster on the field is equipped with an equip card, you contribute it to special summon an insect monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. This is a great way to get out Metamorphosed Insect Queen, but because it also ignores summoning conditions, you can also get out Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth if you need 3500 attack stat. Also, while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it, take an insect from your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and then draw a card. It's a draw, it recycles, this card is perfect. It's the only card that I wish we could play more than one copies of in this deck, because it's fantastic. Spider Egg is in here as a way to deter direct attacks. It makes tokens, which are the same size as the insect monster tokens, but they're summoned in attack positions, so unfortunately they're not going to help absorb a lot of damage, but it's better than being attacked directly, and if they survive, you got some free tokens to work with. Layer Wire is removal. You just banish an insect monster from the graveyard, and then you pop a monster on the field. Pretty good. Corrosive Scales here. This one I like a lot. You target an insect you control, equip it with this card, and your opponent can only attack that monster. Technically, they can't attack insect monsters except the equipped monster, but it's domain. It's basically only directing monsters towards the equipped monster, and if you equip it to something big like Metamorphosed Insect Queen or Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth, they're going to have a problem getting over it. And it's going to get even worse because each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster or activates a card or effect, a scale counter is placed on each face-up monster that they control, and each monster your opponent controls loses 100 attack and defense for each scale counter that it has. So if they try to set up in front of you while you have Corrosive Scales, any monster that sticks around for a while is going to get severely debuffed. Now, the problem is that it puts the counters on those monsters instead of Corrosive Scales itself accumulating those counters and then debuffing your opponent based on those. So your opponent can sequence things in a way where their monster is on the board for as short a time as possible to reduce the debuff. But that's a lot of hoops they're going to have to jump through to prevent that. In general, you're going to get a pretty solid debuff out of your opponent for that, especially with all of the effect activations that happen in this gosh darn game. Lastly, in the main deck, we have DNA Surgery. You can pick a monster type. All face-up monsters on the field become that type. Insect. We have now punished our opponent for having insect monsters. All of those effects will now work on them. I really like the main deck, and now I get to talk about the extra. Ultimate Great Insect is a level 9 fusion monster, 3000 attack, 2600 defense, great stats. It requires a level 8 insect and a level 7 insect as material. And, well, we have 7s here, and we have some 8s over here. So we can hard fusion summon this with cards like Beetrooper Landing or Polymerization, but you can also summon this by tributing an insect monster you control with 2000 or more defense that is equipped with an equip card. The idea here is to equip a monster with Bio Insect Armor. It provides 2000 defense, so as long as it's not equipped to a Link monster during the main phase 2, or I guess just on the main phase 2, because you can't do any of that during the battle phase, you can tribute the equipped monster to summon out Ultimate Great Insect. Or you can summon it during main phase 1 if the monster already has a sufficiently high defense stat. But why would you do that? Well, on top of having Battle Destruction Protection, once per turn during the battle phase, if there is a face-up card in a field zone, which we've got a couple, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls. It's a Raigeki every single turn. Though remember, as the rules of Domain go, because it specifies an opponent, you have to pick an opponent's board to blast. It doesn't destroy all of them. Next up, we have Ultra Beetrooper Absolute Hercules. This, when fusion summoned, becomes unaffected by all other card effects until the end of your next turn. That is a ton of time that you are safe from your opponent. If you summon this during your turn, you have 3 other players' whole turns where this thing is unaffected by their cards, and then when it gets back to your turn, it's also unaffected for the entirety of that turn. So you've got a lot of free time to use this card, and it's 4000 attack and defense stat line. Also, at the end of the battle phase, you can target an insect monster in your grave with 3000 or less attack and special summon it. Note once again, this is the end of the battle phase, not your battle phase. So the more your opponents go to battle phase, the more insects that you get. The only downside is that this requires 4 insect monsters to fusion summon for, which is honestly atrocious. You might want to consider playing something like Necrofusion that lets you use material from the graveyard. Diobalantis, the Menacing Mantis, on top of having one of the best names in the game, is a foolish burial for insect and plant monsters. The issue is that we can't actually play it in this deck because I forgot to actually put in a tuner monster. Now, if you add Beargrim as the deck master, you'll have access to the plant monsters that have really good tuners in them, so you'll have a better chance of summoning this, but for now, just kind of skip over this. But if you do add the plant monsters, hey, you can do more synchro climbing stuff. I also forgot to mention that Battle Wasps, they're getting a lot of new support recently, and they have a ton of tuners. So if that's another archetype that you want to put in here, Diobalantis is going to be huge for the Battle Wasp pool. Number 3, Cicada King is a rank 3 monster that negates monster effects. It just kind of felt like it fits. Traptrix Allomeris is a rank 4 that we can make in here. Also just summons monsters out of the graveyard. Inzektor, Exastag, and Exabeetle. We do have ways of summoning these out, but not a lot. These are really just in here because we have the Inzektors as well, but their effects are kind of subpar right now, so I wouldn't count on it. Link Spider is in here because of the wealth of normal monsters we have here, so if we draw like 2 or 3 of them, this lets us link 1 into Spider and then summon another out of our hand to get into a link 2, and while it is not an insect monster, it is an Earth Attribute 1, so it does fit into Parasite's domains. Inzektor Picofelina probably was too powerful for this pod. This card is actually amazing. So when Link summoned, you discard a card, target another insect monster, and equip it with any insect monster from your deck. It gives a 500 attack and defense bonus, but the major idea is it's basically a foolish burial with extra steps. You can give it Resonance Insect, you can give it Goki Pole, and then you can link away the monster that you equipped them to, and that'll trigger their effects. The best part, though, is that once per turn, you can target 3 insects in your graveyard, shuffle them into your deck, and then draw a card. So not only does it give you multiple usages of your insects in a singleton format, where the idea is generally you only get 1 usage of a card per game, it also draws you a card, so you can dig for more answers. Shinobi Insect Hagakuremono is pretty good for stalling as long as you can point it to a monster, whether it's below it with its down arrow or to the top left. If you still have an opponent across from you, if they have a monster in either their middle or their far right zone, you can summon this to the EMZ, and then now you have a monster that cannot be attacked, which can potentially save your butt from a big attack onslaught. And then if the monster not equipped to it, that it points to is destroyed, you can summon out another insect, which means that you can summon it to its link point again to continue the protection or to continue hiding from attacks. Next is Beetrooper Armorhorn. This is a fantastic monster for the theme. It gives you an additional normal summon of any insect, and then you can reborn it from your graveyard by banishing insects, so it helps you with your link climbing. The only issue here is that it locks you into insects while on the board, but it's literally not an issue with us. Seraphim Papillon is a link 3. The more monsters we put into it, the more counters that it gets, and it can remove a counter once per turn as a quick effect to summon a level 4 or lower insect from our grave in defense position. So no link monsters here and no big insects, but we get more free monsters. And lastly is Giant Beetrooper Invincible Atlas. It takes 2+ insect monsters, and while it is link summoned and has 3,000 or less attack, it cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects or destroyed by their card effects. It's a pseudo towers that we can access, especially once we've used Seraphim Papillon and we don't need to worry about using up its counters. It's just really good link material to go up into Invincible Atlas. And if you need to get over something that has 3,000 or more attack, you can tribute an insect monster to put this up to 5,000. This card, of course, does get better when we actually play main deck Beetroopers because we can use the tribute to summon out that Beetrooper and access their effects. You may have noticed that the extra deck count is a little slim. That's because we played 2 Ragnarika links that are currently not in Master Duel. The first one was Stag Sovereign, which gives us some removal if our opponent summons a monster from the extra deck, which is pretty cool. And it's a Link 5 that requires 2+ monsters, so if we're done with Giant Bee Trooper Invincible Atlas, or we have a Link 3 that we can add on to a Link 2, we get to make it. It's a big statted monster that has some reactive removal. We also added Ragnarika Mantis Monk, which I forgot post making this deck that we actually aren't running the trap card that it was made to search. So another oopsie. I definitely would have replaced that. I loved playing this deck, but like I said earlier, this was meant for a particular power level. If you can focus in on which aspects of the deck you don't want to do, there's the punishing our opponent for having insect themes, there's the insects with equip cards theme, there's the normal insect theme going on in here. If you can identify any of those play patterns that you don't like, you could replace them by expanding the Inzektor engine. You could put in Bee Troopers, or you can make it more synchro focused with Battle Wasps, or you could put Ragnarika in here. Once again, if you use Beargrim as your deck master, because plants are part of its domain, you can now play all of the plant ones without having to worry about it conflicting with your stuff. There's a lot of places to go with this, but I very much enjoyed what we had when we first played. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. What would you add to this deck? And are you interested in playing a Weevil game? Let me know down below. I want to hear what your thoughts are, because half the fun of sharing your ideas is hearing what everyone else's ideas are as well, so we can learn some other stuff that I hadn't even considered. Earth is part of our domain, but I only looked at insects. There might be some earth monsters that would work really good here. Ooh, you think Vernisylphs might have a place in here? We'd have to cut some of the non-earth monsters in here, but I think we could do it. Yeah, so let me know down below. I want to hear what your thoughts are. If you are interested in domain stuff, I have a link to their Discord in the description. It is the best place to go to if you have questions about the format, if you want to get some games with people, all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. I love the people over there. Definitely give it a look. Until next time, where I inevitably talk about some other strange and interesting domain deck, I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. And speaking of those lovely patrons, I'd like to give them a thanks right now. This month's Quasar Commander is Upstairs Media, Nebula Navigators are Third Dynasty, 50 Gigabits, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Owexatowe Hime, Anansi Dragon, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Emony Chan, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Gloomba331, Great Big Pillock, Groog, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander711, Carp, Leo458, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Megacombi, Millennia Asta, Mern, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Skybuster Leo, The Critic of Innocence, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders, Ariel Kersey, Baron von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzephyr, Beluga Master, Blitzwolf, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper, R.I.P., Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Ignis Heat, the True Draco Slayer, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Marluxia's a Girl, Matt Simmons, McSpoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Night Trummo, Nyx, Obsidian, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Pokemon 52, Tiger X2476, Visor KG, Zeldreka and Zalus, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you liked what you saw and want to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits, and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the links to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member.